Hi there! Today we are going to learn about a new instrument. This week's instrument of the week is the flute. Flutes are members of the woodwind family. That's a family of instruments that we haven't learned about yet. We've learned about percussion instruments, right? Instruments that you tap or shake to make a noise. And we've learned about string instruments that you pluck or bow a string to make a noise. But woodwinds are a totally different type of instrument. They're an instrument that you actually blow into to get a sound. You would blow air into or across a mouthpiece to make the notes on a woodwind. And as you might have guessed, woodwind instruments are made of wood. They're not all made of wood anymore, but at one time, most of the instruments in the woodwind family were made of wood. And when you think of a flute, you think of a transverse flute. Transverse flute is what you see right here, and transverse just means that you hold it out to the side when you play rather than in front of you like a trumpet. And the flute has been part of history for thousands of years, and it's changed over the years to look like this flute that you would see if you went to a concert or saw an orchestra play nowadays. There are three parts to a flute. A flute has a head joint, it has a body, and it has a foot joint. The head joint is closed on the end. It has a lip plate and an embouchure hole. This is the part where you make the noise. You rest your mouth here and you blow across the hole, sort of like you would blow across the mouth of an empty bottle to make a noise. That's the same way of making a sound on a flute. On the body, there are several different keys. You use both hands to press the different keys, and different combinations of pressed keys and open keys will give you different pitches and different notes. And there's a couple extra keys here on the foot joint that you would play with your pinky finger to change some of the pitches as well. And the foot joint is open on the end to allow the air to flow through. Some fun facts. The average length of a flute is 66 centimeters long, so it's about 2 feet long. A musician who plays the flute is a flute player, a flautist, or sometimes a fluter. And there are many different sizes of flutes, even within the flute family. So here's a piccolo right here. This one's very small. It's about a foot long, and it's very, very high pitched. It plays very high notes. The alto is kind of a middle-ish flute. It's a little bit lower than a typical flute, and it's got a little curve on the mouthpiece there. There's also tenor flutes, bass flutes, and this big guy right here is a contrabass flute. It's hard to tell from the picture, but it's actually taller than a person, and you have to stand up to play it. It plays very, very low notes. More fun facts, a standard concert flute is pitched in the key of C. So that's what you see right here, no sharps, no flats. A flute can play sharps and flats, but it's in the key of C. And it has a range of approximately 3 octaves. So you can play notes down here, you can play notes way up here, and every note in between can be played on a standard flute. An alto flute, as I said, was a little bit lower, and it's pitched in the key of G. The different flutes are pitched in different keys, so here's a couple of examples. And as I said earlier, flutes used to be made of wood, and they used to be made of lots of different materials as well. They used to be made of bone and glass and ivory, plastic. Nowadays, they're mostly made of metals like nickel and silver and gold, but they can be made out of lots of different things. Here's some famous faces. Bet you didn't know George Washington, James Madison, and Leonardo da Vinci were all flute players. Flutes are super old. They are considered one of the earliest instruments. They date back to Germany over 35,000 years ago. Many cultures have their own versions of the flute. For example, this guy right here is a traditional Japanese flute called the shakuhachi. And the earliest use of the word flute was from the 14th century. So several hundred years ago did they start calling this instrument a flute. And that's it for my facts. So let's take a listen to what a flute sounds like. This is a piece by Vivaldi. It's a flute concerto nicknamed the Goldfinch. Notice how she's holding the flute out to the side, blowing air across the hole, and you hold the flute and play with both hands to press the keys and play the different notes. So, what did you think of that? I hope you liked listening to the flute and hearing how it sounds, seeing what it looks like for someone to play the flute. If you really liked that, there's lots of other flute concertos and flute solos and even relaxing flute music that you could look up on YouTube. So, thank you for watching, and I will be back next week with a new instrument from the woodwind family.